Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to What Did Jesus Say? Greatest teacher of all time. We know that. I'm Gregory Dixon with the Northport Church of Christ, and I want to help educate us today and build us up, elevate us by looking at some things that Jesus said. We know that everything that Jesus said is important and good for us to know and will motivate anyone to become a true spiritual person. You know, over the course of human history, the religious teachings of so many so-called masters have transcended from the ancients down to the modern and progressive of our day. But there's only one true master of the universe. Jesus, the greatest teacher of all time, has succeeded in turning civilizations upside down for truth, for that which is good. Only one can be the greatest teacher of all time. Only one can be the way, the truth, and the life. Only one can be the only begotten Son of God. So I want us to look at least two statements of Jesus today, this week. And they're somewhat related, but not really related. But just remember that everything Jesus said is connected. We find in the first statement is found in John chapter 1. If you'll turn over there with me we want to be in verse 49 for this one. If you're in your books on page 16. And he said that you will see angels. This is the statement that I want us to focus in for just a few moments. You will see angels. So let's read here in verse 49 through 51. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter you shall see the heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Now, we're not really exactly, at least I'm not exactly sure which time Jesus is talking about here that would be in the future. But I can tell you a time when they did see the angels ascending, descending, and ascending on Jesus, and it was in Acts chapter 1. So if you'll turn over there with me for just a moment, we'll look at that occasion. It's found in Acts chapter 1, 9 through 11. And this was at Jesus' ascension. After he had given disciples some instructions about going into all the world and preaching the gospel to everyone, and about them waiting at Jerusalem until they would receive the gift, we find in verse 9, And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and the cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus which is taken up from you into heaven shall so come in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven. You know, without doubt, the disciples of Jesus Christ and those closest to him, those of his apostles, witnessed many strange and wonderful things during the ministry of Jesus. They began seeing more than simply what was obvious, what was just around the corner, or what was just on the surface, a clear indication that they were spending time with the Son of God. You know, it's apparent to us that they witnessed miracles and they witnessed signs and wonders and many strange occurrences. After Jesus' death on the cross, his burial, his resurrection, they saw Christ's church for the first time on the day of Pentecost. This was a Sunday morning described in Acts chapter 2 and verse 1 through verse 41. That same day, that Sunday, they witnessed about 3,000 people being baptized into Jesus Christ for the remission of their sins, adding them to the Lord's body there in Acts 2 verse 47. And with more people responding every day after that, the Lord was adding to his church. you might say, Greg, how do we know that for sure? That here the church that Jesus promised to build had now opened the doors, allowing people, men and women, to enter in that responded favorably and gladly to the good news of the gospel. Because we find, as we read and study that chapter, along with other scriptures, we find that the church was open because we find people being added to it in the last verse of Acts chapter 2. That those that were being saved, the Lord was adding them to his body, or his son's body, the church. You know, though we no longer witness, miracles like the apostles and disciples did during Jesus' day, there are some special things that Christians see today. We see answers to prayer. We don't know how sometimes, many times, that God answers our prayers. But we see the answers come, and we're so joyful when they come to us. Sometimes the answer is no, and we wait patiently for the Lord to answer our prayers. But these are special things that we can see today. I'm not sure that we should say that we don't have the miracles anymore. We have the miracles in written form. We're just not seeing any new miracles today, but we will be witnessing the miraculous once again at the last day, at the end of time. When we see Christ coming back, and we see the angels, we see men's bodies reappearing in a different form. This is the miraculous, and we will witness that again. So until then, we are to have eyes of faith. We're to believe what God has written in his word. We're to believe the witnesses of those miracles so many years ago, as they stood there and watched and looked and saw what God could do through his son Jesus. Now we believe those witnesses today, after all of these years. You will see angels, Jesus said. Another thing that we can learn from Jesus today is something else that he said in the very next chapter. If you still have your Bibles open to John chapter 2, we want to look at Jesus' first miracle. Jesus' first miracle, beginning with verse 1, we want to read down to verse 11. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. When they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. Jesus said unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Jesus said unto them, Fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he saith unto them, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast, and they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom. And he saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. Here we see the wedding in Cana and Jesus' first miracle. Jesus is asked to provide wine for all the guests. Some today question whether this wine that Jesus made was fermented wine, or was it non-alcoholic. There are several good reasons to believe that the wine that Jesus made on this occasion was purely grape juice. The statement here, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, shows us that the time of this wedding to be during the Jews' purification period. Immediately before the Passover, Jews were forbidden to partake of any substance that contained leaven, according to Exodus 12:15 and other places. It was not that the leaven itself was sinful, but that it represented a foreign substance mixed into a purer one. Fermented wine would have been impure for the same reason. It contains ethyl alcohol, a poison. Alcohol is defined as a colorless, volatile, flammable liquid, according to the American Heritage Dictionary. Some have written on the subject of alcohol. Davy points out, alcohol is a drug and a poison. Consuming it involves a risk that increases with the amount consumed. He said the only absolute safe level is 0. It would not be reasonable to believe that Jesus turned the water in these 6 containers, water that would have been used for purification purposes, into a poisonous substance. Neither would he have contributed willingly to the drunkenness of these guests, which was strictly forbidden under the Jewish law. Some try to use this first special miracle that Jesus did when he began his ministry to try to condone the activity of social drinking today. But why? And does social drinking, does it enhance or does it harm a Christian's influence today? These are questions that we really need to ask ourselves. And what other scriptures can we go to along this particular subject? Dear Lord, may we remember to respect Thee and Thy church. O God, our Father, let us love and hate the things that You do. May our influence always be for good. Another prayer that we might think about praying, Lord, please supplement my unbelief. Oh, Father, guide me to learn more about Jesus and who He is and about His church. Now, I don't want us to miss a deeper meaning of this miracle at Cana of Galilee. I don't want us to get caught up so much about was the wine fermented or unfermented. I think there's a stronger message here, maybe more than one. But we don't really have a lot of information about Jesus's life between his ages of 12 and at this time around age 30. So here we have about 18 years. But I don't want us to miss something that was said in this passage that we've read. And I think if we're really not really careful, we might miss it. But it wasn't something Jesus said, really. It was something his mother said. And I believe it sums up these 18 years. I don't think we have to know everything Jesus said and did between ages 12 and 30. I think what his mother says right here tells us all that we need to know. In verse 4, of course, Jesus answers her and says, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" But what had she said? Or what is she about to say? She said, his mother saith unto the servants, "Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it." That's the point I want us to take away today in our class, in our devotional. His mother said, "Whatsoever." She must have seen a lot, heard a lot. She had faith in her son to know that whatever, it doesn't matter what he says to you, whatever he says, you do it. That's the point I want us to see today. I believe that's our message. It doesn't matter that what we want to do or what we think that we need to see or do for God. It matters what Jesus wants me to do. He told these servants to fill up the water pots. Now, I can do that. I can't do a miracle. I can't perform some great sign or wonder today, but I can sure fill up a water pot. And so I think a message here today for us is man is involved in God's plan. God wants us to do what we can do. These men couldn't do miracles, but they could fill the water pots with water. Is that something that Jesus could have done too? Yes, he could have done it all. The men could have just sat back and sat still and just watched Jesus work and filling up all the water pots up to the brim. And then when the water was taken to the governor, it would have been wine when it reached the governor. He could have done all of that, but no, he asked his servants to fill the water pot, something that I can do. So I believe this is our real lesson today. Not that the wine was alcoholic or non-alcoholic, so much as whatsoever he says to you, do it. That was from his mother. And I think it's a good lesson for us today that, God did the real lifting for us. He sent his son Jesus, and Jesus lifted that cross, and it was too heavy for us. His cross was heavy to bear, but he lifted it for you and for me, and now I have a cross that I must lift up for him. I appreciate so much your attention today, and thank you for sharing this class with me. If you have any questions or comments about the class, you can email me at gregory2006usa@bellsouth.net. And I want to thank each of you for your time and thank for joining us and being part of our class and sharing with us today. And as always, remember, keep the faith. May God bless you.